Both Islam and Christianity have theologies which can often be seen as overly simplistic. There are believers and unbelievers, those who will be saved and those who will be damned. There is heaven and hell, right and wrong. God is seen as the source of all good, and much of what is evil can be attributed to a specific figure known as Satan or Shaitan. He is seen as the great tempter, the one who is constantly working behind the scenes to disrupt the individual's path to heaven. Various narratives describe him as a fallen angel, one who has disobeyed God and is his direct adversary. But what does Hinduism have to say about evil and the devil? Hindu philosophy lays down various tattvas. Tattvas are categories or principles that describe reality. There are tattvas which describe the nature of God, who we truly are, and what this material world is. But there is no tattva that describes what evil is. Unlike Islam and Christianity, evil is not seen as an absolute force of reality. Nowhere do we find one specific personality who is inherently bad and chiefly responsible for taking individuals away from the truth. This does not mean that Hinduism does not acknowledge evil. Who can deny the innumerable horrific acts that have and continue to go on today? But rather than attribute this to the mysterious workings of Satan, Hindus view this as a product of our lower consciousness. When we are divorced from our relationship with God and we have forgotten our divine nature, then naturally we slump under the control of the mind and ego. We identify purely with our body. We fall into the trap of I and mine. Everything we do becomes about power and pleasure. Instead of gaining mastery over ourselves, we develop attachment to the things of the world. This is how evil develops. Hinduism does recognize the presence of spirits and supernatural beings who exist as lower entities, some of whom can well influence our lives. There is also a clear understanding that there are auspicious and inauspicious periods based on planetary alignment, which can also dictate success and failure. But cosmically and individually, the circumstances of our life are fundamentally dictated by our state of consciousness, our karma, and the path our soul has incarnated to follow. There is no overwhelming force of negativity pushing us away from God. In the Hindu context, it is not Satan that tempts us down the wrong path, but Maya. The Bhakti traditions in particular portray Maya Devi as the energy of the material world. For those seeking to detach and focus their mind on God, she can present various temptations. Wealth, sexual pleasure, fame, and authority can all agitate and lure us away from our path. But having said that, Maya is not inherently evil. Quite the opposite, she is often viewed as a servant of God. She is one who tests and provides important lessons for our spiritual growth. She creates situations and circumstances on behalf of God to make us learn and progress. Ultimately, she is working to bring us closer to the divine. As stated, Satan is often depicted as some kind of fallen angel, one who was with God but then developed an inherent hatred of him and wanted to take over his position. But in Hinduism, being with God is to transcend all limitation and negativity. Good and bad, pain and pleasure, success and failure are all a product of this material world, not the spiritual. Evil simply does not exist when we have reached that supreme divine state. God realization means transcending the world and all that comes with it. To be with God and envy Him is an inherent contradiction. Proximity to the divine means to have unbounded, unconditional love for Him, so there is no question of falling and turning against Him. As the Gita makes clear, knowing Krishna is to reach the realm from which there is no coming back to this material universe. The creation of the devil figure is really a primitive tactic of explaining away the extreme negativity that we see around us. Abrahamic religions use such explanations and conjure up grand prophecies about the Antichrist, a being who is set to fight the Messiah in some great apocalyptic war to come. But such dramatic predictions are merely an attempt to appease a mind which is seeking justice. It is a way of kicking the can down the road into some future event, where finally the tension between good and evil can be reconciled. It provides hope that ultimately, in the future, God will triumph and all suffering will cease. The promise to its followers is that all we need to do is have faith and keep clinging on until that victory day happens. But what about the numerous demons and asuras in Hindu narratives? Can they not be seen as some form of antichrist or devil figure? In short, no. While these personalities recklessly seek power and control at any cost, they cannot be regarded as an equivalent to Satan. Their actions and negativity certainly arise from an intensely ego-based consciousness, but they are not to be seen as the direct adversary of God himself. When we look at asuras such as Hiranyakashipu, who was killed by Lord Narasimha, or Ravana, who was slain by Lord Ram, we see that they played an important role in the glorification of God. They are part of his divine play. Through them, we are made aware of the consequences of the negativity within us, and also the awesome power and majesty of God. These stories are not to be viewed as an apocalyptic encounter between good and evil, but rather as meditations that open up the profundity of our relationship with the divine. In summary, Satan or Shaitan is really a being that has been created to fill a hole in Abrahamic theology. When there is a lack of understanding of consciousness and transcendence, when we do not believe in karma or reincarnation, when we have not fully explored what we have within, then naturally negativity gets explained away in overly simplistic terms. For those who have limited spiritual awareness, such explanations provide much needed clarity. They create sharp distinctions that make it easy to draw clear judgments about what reality is and how we should deal with it. But for those who are more advanced, a more nuanced and detailed understanding is needed. This is what Hindu theology is all about. It has no absolute evil tattva which can quickly explain the negativity in the world. It instead urges us to look within and take responsibility for our own existence. It compels us to understand that our true identity, and of course God himself, is utterly aloof from the dualities of the material world. Rather than perceiving things as good and evil, we are called to develop spiritual awareness and see the underlying divinity that exists in all scenarios. Fundamentally, evil exists not because of some outside entity, but rather because we as individuals have failed to master ourselves. We have allowed our ego to run riot within us. Evil can be conquered when each of us understands who we truly are. It can be transcended when grace transforms our heart and brings real wisdom. Once this is done, we will see that ultimately evil does not exist at all. This is when we live out our divine purpose to serve humanity and to serve God. Many thanks for listening.